Oh, I need to actually change out the banner. Should probably do that. Anyway, I think it's live, so let's see here. Oh, actually, one sec. Just need that banner as well. Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, there we go with the banner. Nice. Up to some percent off behind me apparently. It's unknown. I could offset it a little bit. Oh, well, okay, the banner's not long enough. We'll change that for next time. It'll be like a guessing game. Okay, connection look good. I'm just gonna close my door real quick. Okay, wow. I had a lead belt blocking the door. Okay. Okay. Yeah, please do. Okay, OBS there. And nice. Okay, great. I think we're ready to go. Yeah, so welcome to anyone who's already watching. I think there are some viewers now. 15, 21. Today, for maybe an hour and a half, I'll be spearheading this stream, and we'll be playing around with some geometry nodes in Blender. This is going to be as much of a learning experience for anyone who's watching as me, because I haven't really played around with geometry nodes too much. I've done a lot of node work in Blender, but only just touched the surface of geometry nodes. So it's kind of an experiment in creating a scene with geometry nodes, sort of creating a scatter system with geometry nodes. And for that, I've downloaded some assets from FlippedNormals to scatter in our scene. And Henning is here to assist, because sometimes when you're streaming and you're working, it can be hard to keep up with chat and answer questions. So we'll sort of tag team this a little bit. So first off, I'll just load up a workspace for geometry nodes. I don't really have much of an idea. Like, I have a kind of an idea in mind in terms of a rough landscape, but I think this will just evolve as we get into it, really. Oh yeah, how did that go? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Oh, in where? Oh, wait. Oh, that's a problem. That's a problem. One sec. So your audio would be coming through my desktop audio, which means I'm gonna have to pause this music. Otherwise, can you try saying something again, Henning?
Hello, hello, testing,
Okay,
testing.
yeah, I see it now. I see it now. Okay, that should work. just like
Okay,
just
let's
have a
hope.
talking head that doesn't say
Is
anything.
this is this fine now in the stream?
There we go.
Should the audio be working now or
I think it
all
should
good?
be.
Okay, cool.
I definitely see it. I see your audio
Okay, awesome.
in
Then we should
OBS.
assume that's fine. All good, all good. Yeah, Dave was saying he's probably teaching us the meaning of life, but we'll never know. Yeah, that's true. I actually was, and but unfortunately, there's just no way to repeat that. Once the meaning of life has been said, then that's it. Sorry. I was just talking about the stream yesterday, how we went over anatomy. So if anyone is interested in learning about the skeleton, you can just check out the yesterday stream. It was a really good one. It was about an hour, good hour of just talking about just pure anatomy, just important stuff about the skeleton. So yeah, really good. Uh, yeah, there was somebody who had a question about the anatomy model I was using yesterday as well. It's a really cool model that I've been using. It's called Z Anatomy. Let me just find that one. It seems like the link was down yesterday. The link is down. It's a Wix domain, it seems like, and that is busted.
A Wix domain. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's the reason why people don't like Wix. Yeah, I guess that is just completely busted right now. Let's see if I can find that one.
So, essentially, the basics of what I will do here is a plane, which is going to be our landscape, and we'll create a scatter system with geometry nodes that we can sort of swap in and out, and I'll try to combine things, and we'll see how much complexity we can cram into it. And it's going to be working off of assets that I bought from FlippedNormals. Yeah, that sounds weird, but yeah, we bought them off FlippedNormals from a really cool creator, and we'll see what we can do with that. It's a mix of trees, rocks, flowers, plants, grasses, like a bunch of stuff to try and liven up the scene. So let's get started here.
I'm just noting there are questions here. I'm just gonna let you work for a bit, and whenever you're thinking or doing something else, I'll just take some of the questions.
I mean, yeah, feel free to just take them as we go along, and I'll sort of, because there's a lot of things. I'm not going to be explaining everything going through this because I'm also trying to solve it in my head at the same time. So no worries there.
All right, cool. So the first question is, I'm trying to switch from Maya to Blender. Do you recommend keeping the rotate middlemost button? It feels so unnatural. Yeah, the reason it feels unnatural is just because you haven't done it enough. It's one of these navigation in 3D isn't really natural or unnatural. It's just whatever you're used to. I always recommend that people stick to the defaults in Blender. If you're starting to mess around, particularly with navigation, I generally try that in the beginning. Then you're starting to screw up with so many things. Like for instance, in Maya, you have Alt left mouse button to rotate, and using Alt a lot there. And then if you try to remap something to that, then suddenly your loop selection tools in Blender are busted. Now you have to remap that. So it's like a whack-a-mole game. So you can either just go down the rabbit hole of trying to customize it to fix your existing routine, or you can just get used to it. It's going to take you a few days to get used to it. It sucks. It really is very painful to switch. There's just no way around it. It just sucks to switch software. But I highly recommend you just switch to, you stick to the default one. Don't even use the industry compatible key map. Just stick to default. And then you can switch it around once you're comfortable. The reason you don't want to stick to industry compatible is not because it's bad or anything inherently, or to customize things. It's just because you can't follow tutorials, and you need a lot of tutorials in the beginning. Blender is uniquely hotkey based. So if you have something in Maya and somebody tells you the function, you can always just find that through the menus. But people in doing Blender tutorials are just going to say, yeah, just double click the G key, then hit X, Y, and Z. Right? They're not going to be using the gizmos or anything to that extent. One of the strengths of Blender is that it is hotkey based. You can do stuff really fast, but it's also a real downside in a lot of ways when following tutorials or we're learning it, because it's like playing the piano. So yeah, basically in short, just stick to default. Stick to default as much as you can in the beginning.
So just to give some context on what's happening here, I am just creating a very basic setup where we're distributing points on faces, and our face being the plane, and it's just selecting random, like these, I don't know, kind of sprites, I guess. And we want to tell Blender that we're going to use real geometry, or in our case, we're going to use a collection of geometry, to scatter on the plane instead. So we'll just select our collection here, into instances. Now we have a beautiful landscape of not actual trees. They look great.
Very pretty. I find it to be a good idea what you're doing now when you're trying to figure out the tech of something instead of just modeling the trees and making everything beautiful. Just prototype it. Just be sure that it works with a cube.
Yeah, exactly.
If it doesn't work with a cube, it's not going to work with anything else.
I think. Well, I'll also create like a little system for randomizing scale, and I think rotation as well, and the density. But for now, we'll just pick everything from in here, and then we can always add complexity to the system. But the main idea here is that I want to create a system where we have a collection of trees that are getting scattered, a collection of rocks, a collection of flowers, and then possibly incorporate weight painting into that as well, so we can paint on our plane where things are being scattered. But you know, it's a complex thing to build up, and we'll sort of build it up slowly as we go along.
I love the addition of geometry nodes. I haven't really played with it, but it's just, it opens up a whole new way of working. It's not like a new modifier or something. It's just a fundamentally new way of creating things. It's going to be incredible to see what people create with this over the next few years, particularly as the tools are getting better as well.
No. But like I said in the beginning, geometry nodes is sort of a new thing for me as well. I played around with nodes. I've done a lot with nodes in Blender. And from what I can see, you can translate a lot of the node work to geometry nodes. It's just about, sometimes there are settings that you just have to know, or you have to know the name of the new nodes that you can only use with geometry nodes, for example. Like distribute points on faces. That's a new one, which is it's restricted to geometry nodes, for example, and you wouldn't have that normally. The same with, I think, converting volume data to mesh, or the other way around, converting mesh data to volume. There's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do. You just have to know where to look, and you have to know how to do it. So we have, let's just make sure that we don't duplicate our plane into there. There we go. So right now we have our plane, and we have these magnificent representations of trees being scattered on the ground. And the way this happens is through a collection info node. And the collection info node just takes whatever is in our tree collection, in this case just 3 cubes that I've named trees. The naming isn't really important. And it just scatters them across the plane. And let's see, for example, one of the settings that you just have to know is this one, pick instance, where if you don't do pick instance, it'll scatter everything that's in your collection of the same point, and just, scatter that everywhere. Whereas if you pick instance, it'll choose one of the I guess children of the collection to scatter across the plane. And I think for reference, what we'll do is we'll just get like some scale reference in here so we can see what we're working with. And pretend that this is a person. So there we go. So this person is 2 meters tall. So some fairly large trees right now, and it's a very fat tree, but it's just to give us a sense of scale to see what we're working with. By the way, does anyone know how in Blender, in the viewport shading, like just the standard one, how to enable colors? Because I can never get that to work, and I haven't looked into it. I've just thought about it for a long time. So like if I give this dude a representation of a person a color, nothing happens.
Yeah, you have to go down, all the way down in the material, like in the same one in the material you actually have. And then all the way down to the bottom, all the way down. There's one called, it's behind your head now in the stream. It's under viewport
display.
Yeah, and then you can just give it a specific color.
But how do I make it use the base color of a material, for instance? So
I think these are two entirely independent things.
Okay.
This is the only way I found it. This is really annoying for me as well because I have the.
Then we'll do random.
Yeah, because I often want to display a texture in the viewport as well, but I can only the only way I figured out how to do that is to use the material viewport. But that's also not fantastic. It's great for certain things.
You don't want the weird lighting from this one, for example.
No, exactly. And I don't want to use Eevee or something. I just want to use Workbench for this.
Scene lights? Nah, whatever. We'll just stick to random, and then we'll go from there. Yes, Morten is alive. I've been hiding in development land for a long time, so I'm poking my head out today.
Yeah, what's been happening here is that we've well, first we have a nice summer sale, but this summer sale is on a brand new version of FlippedNormals, which we launched 27th of December last year. So basically, we had 6 months now of trying to stabilize the site, adding new features to it. We had the old site that was quite feature rich, based on an existing framework, but it was falling apart. So we had to rebuild the whole thing essentially from scratch. And now we're re-adding a lot of new things. Like for instance, we just added ratings back to the site. So we're slowly adding the things we had on the site, on the old site, back to it. But the advantage of the new one is just that we control everything. So that's why Morten has been in. He's disappeared.
Yeah,
he's been in a basement for like 6 months.
So let's. First thing we'll do here is we'll add the density max to our geometry node. Input output over here. So this is something you can do with geometry nodes. You can add your own inputs based on what you have in your settings. But for this one, you can see it acts a little bit weird. Like sometimes it pops in, sometimes it doesn't. That's because this density max is a float value by default. And this is something that's really cool about geometry nodes, which I wish you could do by default in Blender. You can do this with a bunch of math nodes in order to convert floats to integers. But under the geometry nodes, you can go and select a float type and then change between float and integer. You can do some of this with normal nodes, but it's not as extensive. So then when you do this, you just have whole numbers and you can go up and down in terms of density, which is pretty cool. Next up, let's see.
So what is your main like philosophy with this, Morten, in terms of how you're building it up? It's obviously not just do random nodes. Like, what are you thinking about when doing this?
So right now it's about building the base system. I mean, I could switch over to using particles, for example, and the Blender particle system has all of this functionality already. It's just a little janky to work with. The nice thing with geometry nodes is that you can make it as complex or as simple as you want, and you can, take away functionality or introduce functionality however you you decide, or like for whatever purposes you need. And so the base philosophy for this is just build it up slowly. I just, right now it's just, okay, we got the fake trees to scatter on the plane, step one. And then we want to add a little bit of functionality. For example, how do we deal with density? That's one thing. Density will evolve a little bit because I wanted to work with weight painting as well. So in a little bit, we'll create a vertex group with some weights on this. So everywhere we paint, that's where we're going to scatter. And then we'll create added functionality like random rotation and random scale as well. So it's just building it up piece by piece until we have a system we're happy with. And once we're there, which is all like, this can be the boring stuff, but it can also be fun. But after all this stuff is done, then we can start replacing whatever we have in this group here with our actual geometry that we want to use. So that's the main philosophy behind this.
It's very cool. And it looks like a really fun and procedural system to work with.
And that's the cool thing. It's 100% procedural. So you can just swap out nodes and for whatever you want really. So let's do that for our scale down here actually. So I'm gonna there's some really good videos by what's his name? CG Generalist? The CG Essentials, that's the guy who does a lot of Blender content as well. He has some really good videos on this exactly, like scattering and stuff. So let's do that. The problem with the random value node just gives you random values between 0 and 1, or whatever you decide to put this at. And then you can introduce a seed as well, which is great for randomizing even further when we expand the system. So you could, let's say we use this random value here for trees. If I then duplicate this system, it would have the same seed value if we use this for rocks, which would mean that it would place the rocks or give the rocks the same scale as our trees. Then we can just change the seed independently from these two systems. And then the rocks would have one seed and the trees would have another seed. And you can do this for the distribution as well. Like, so you could have a main seed, for example, that controls everything. So you change this one main seed and it changes the seed value for rocks, trees, flowers. But then you could expand upon that and sort of subdivide the control further, so you could also go in and change the seed value individually for the trees or for the plants, for the rocks. So it's just, there's infinite possibilities with what you can do in terms of complexity for geometry nodes.
We're having a few questions or comments about learning Blender, and I just want to shoot a link to one of our products that's currently 40% off. This is, you see this in the chat now, this is switching to Blender for experienced artists. A lot of people are really struggling to learn Blender. And if you come from another software, like the comments before about navigation and such, and modeling, learning all that kind of stuff. So we made a course exactly for that kind of person. Basically, I made it for Morten and myself some years back, what the course we would have liked to use. I highly recommend this course. It's going to make learning Blender a lot easier. Of course, it's always going to be painful. You still have to retrain muscle memory and all that. But at least in terms of figuring out where the tools are, the main philosophy behind that, I highly recommend switching to Blender for experienced artists.
So because we're working with large scenes, I just went into the view node and changed our clipping distance to 10,000 meters instead of 1,000, because otherwise this starts to happen when we want an overview of our scene. So we'll do that.
Yeah. Hey, remember to save your scene.
Oh, good idea. Good idea. That's a good idea.
I feel like the saving angel with this being like, hey, you should, your MacBook is dying. You need to save your scene.
Mid-meeting, my MacBook runs out of power. It happens far too often.
Yeah, suddenly we just lose Morten.
Okay. Forest. There you go. It's been saved. Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. One of the things, no, not really relevant for our scale, I guess. We want it to scale on all axes. We'll cover that with rotation. Ignore this for now. Ignore this for now. What we can do is, like with the other value with density, for example, you could hook this up to your plane as well, and then have your scale distance, or your scale here. I'm wondering if to give our value here. So because we're working with such a large scene, in order to scale it down to something that looks manageable, we have to get down to really small values. But I'm wondering if we put in like a math node or something, if we could avoid doing that. So we could multiply this. Let's say this is 1. So we multiplied by 1. Okay, yeah, that works. Cool. Man, I love geometry nodes. That's so cool. So we can multiply this by 0.1, for example, and now our max value over here is still going to start from 1, but it's being multiplied by 0.1. So it's just easier for us to control, and we have a lot more. We have like a larger range that we can scale in, if that makes any sense. I hope that made sense.
I'm just excited to see you add trees to this.
Yeah, see if I have time to actually add any trees today. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a boring box demo of me. I mean, this is something I'll do throughout this week. I want to keep working on this. It's not just going to be like a one stream thing. I want to keep working on it until we get to something really, really cool. So I think, yeah, this is, so you could call this, for example, you could call this the scale factor. It's just a normal math node. But you can go in and you can rename or give them a label instead of multiply, so you know what's going on. If you hit F2, you can rename it to something more appropriate than the th, but you could do that. But I'll wait a little bit with that until we know what's going on here. So again, this is our scale person. They're 2 meters tall, around 6 feet. And now we have some really tiny trees, which is also good, but we can always adjust this. And then after that, I think what we'll do is we're going to add some random rotation to our objects as well. So we can do that by the random value as well. Let's move this down, move this up. And this is a really cool thing I saw from one of the videos from CG Essentials, where you separate out what you want to rotate. And for this scene here, I mean, we have trees, for example. The trees, we want to restrict their rotation to just be in Z, so like just around the vertical axis. But for the rocks, for instance, we might want to have the rotation be around all axes, and if you wanted that, you can just use a random value. It'll just pipe in the random value. But you control the trees a little bit better. What we'll do is we'll add a combine XYZ value, and then we can feed that, let's see, into our max as well. And we could pipe this into rotation, I guess, yeah. Or call it rotation. So we'll pipe that back into a geometry. It's just the C, and take that value into rotation. And this won't work because this needs to be set to vector. Okay. Truly, why it needs to be vector and not a float, I don't understand. I need someone who deeply understands how geometry nodes work in order to explain that, but I just know that works. I would like to explain all the things in depth, like this is why you should do the thing, but especially when it comes to node work, there's so much stuff that I truly don't understand math-wise, so sometimes you just have to learn why you need to do things with nodes, which is one of the things that really annoy me, because I would like to have a deeper understanding. I'm like, okay, you need to do this because that's why it'll produce, this and this result.
It's often like that when you're dealing with 3D, where you're wondering, why do I click this checkbox? And then you go into a rabbit hole and it leads you to like a 10-hour Khan Academy calculus course, or particularly with like this kind of stuff. Like, why is it a float or not a vector, or a vector on the float? Well, math, right? Like it's just the stuff that we're just not trained at when it comes to that.
Yeah. So we'll do, what is max? Okay, max is our scale. I want to change that. Okay, so now we have a slider for random scale, which is being multiplied by a scale factor in order to make it a little more workable here in the outliner. And we'll have a random rotation as well that just applies a random rotation to all the objects. And the nice thing about both here is that you could give it a seed. So if we take our scale, for example, it'll just apply a seed, a random seed to everything. So for the rotation, we'll just do 1. See what that looks like. We'll do 10. Super random now. Cool. So now, you can start to see that things are happening. It's populated with a little more trees. So now we have a random scatter of everything. Might want to randomize the scale. Cool. I mean, this is really the basics of our scatter system for now, I think. Gabriel says vectors are transformable, floats are not. Still not sure what that means.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
Gotta be honest.
Look, we make monsters. We're good at that.
I just know I need to use vectors. I can't use floats. Vectors are transformable. Okay, so basic system there. We'll remember to save again. Let me think. Let's see. You think of something we should be doing to this, Henning?
Sorry, what's that? For
do you have any suggestions for what should be happening to this geometry node system?
Yeah, we should add trees.
Oh, okay, we should add trees. Okay, well we can add trees. We can add trees. So save that, and I'll find my tree pack, or my forest pack, I guess. Now the problem is here, I don't actually know what is what. I know there's some ferns. I think there's some birch trees. Oh, okay, there you go. Water lilies, cliffs, rocks, great. So let's go for birch 1. That seems like a solid choice. One sec, I lost it. It's lost in the pile of bushes now. There you go, birch 1. I really hope this works though. I haven't actually checked out this pack before, so there we go. Nice birch tree right there. To that birch tree we have a leaf component.
Birch trees, my mortal pollen enemy.
That's why I chose it. That's what it is.
Can you light the scene on fire afterwards?
Okay, so IWD soon says vector is X, Y, and Z float outputs only one value. Okay, now I get it. Perfect. That's good to know. I feel like that's one of those fundamentals of nodes that you really need to know. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I suppose like vectors have a directionality, and floats is just a number.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. So if you pipe in a float value, like if we did that instead of setting it to vector, that it would just output like a number, and that's why it would rotate, rotate like this all over the place instead of rotating in one direction. Okay. I'm assuming this is a low res version of the birch tree, which we can probably get rid of. Let's just do that. And then I will find a texture that matches this tree. I really hope that these are on like one tile. That would be, oh dear God. Okay. I'm sure that's fine. Let's see though.
I really hope they do an update, like a proper update to the UV tools in Blender soon.
Oh,
those are so neglected. Like even when you're opening up the UV editor now, it doesn't really display the the tiles by default. It's just a huge mess.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. I used to use it, like, I don't know, 7 years ago, because back then I think Blender had like out of the box the best on-ramp algorithm, probably aside from ZBrush. But it seems like really nothing has happened with the UV tools.
Yeah, a few things here and there, but and there are like some like paper cuts we're fixing and some additions to the layout tools and such, but it's still fundamentally a real pain to use. Like with the sync selection and everything, it's just very, very unintuitive to use.
Yeah.
And then people are talking about, no, it's fine, just use these add-ons, and then you buy $200 worth of add-ons, and now it's it's decent.
One sec, I just need to check out. So this pack, which is the forest pack by Let's Make Cool Art on FlippedNormals. That's an awesome creator name.
If you put a link to that in the chat, people can see what you're using.
Let me just do that. 1 sec.
Feels a little weird to buy products from our own marketplace, but I mean, they're really good products.
Yeah.
We have like, we're close to 30,000 products now. What is like 28,000 we have now?
Yeah.
I think it's something like that. It's bonkers.
Pretty
It's also
mental.
why we had to rebuild the site, because my God, stuff was getting slow.
Yeah. Just need to check something because I want to make sure we can actually match these textures with the correct meshes. I know that there's a in the scene as well, or in the pack as well, there's a an Unreal file as well. So if you're using Unreal, you can just load it in, and it's ready to go, which is pretty cool. I mean, really, I should be creating stuff like this in Unreal.
Yeah.
I just don't know anything about Unreal yet. It is
such a powerful tool.
Yeah. Hey.
Well, while you're working on that, we can do so. There's a question that we keep having now. Like it's from Mario and a few other people talking about how the like is Blender caught up yet to Maya, and both yes and no in terms of modeling tools. Yeah, it's great. I mean, in many ways, it's way more powerful than Maya because like you have like geometry nodes here, and you have you just have a lot of very interesting and good tools like the modifiers as well. You don't have modifiers in Maya, you have deformers, a completely different thing. So in many ways, it's much more powerful. In many ways, it's not. Like you have the marquee menu system, which means it's not that hotkey based. but that's more of a preference. UV tools are obviously better in Maya, but in general, the modeling tools in Blender they're good. Like you can do what you want with that. The problem becomes more when you want to work in a more of a bigger production, because we've been talking about this a long time, and we just had like a month ago or so, we were on a podcast with CG Cookie, and we talked about this in depth, which I have no idea when that's coming out, but you can hear more about that then. But it's like if you're dealing in a production professional environment, it's just a much bigger case of, is it better or not? Like the gist of it is that if you were to replace Maya with Blender in a full-on production, like at Framestore, DNIG, or one of the other tools or big companies, it would have to not be like a little bit better. It would have to be significantly better, like order of magnitude, like 10 times better, because you have the case that they have so many tools built into it, so they can start a production right now. Give them the funding for the project, they can start tomorrow on the next Marvel show, because they have the tools. But if you were to work in Blender for that, you can't just do that. They could not just go, yeah, cool, let's just get the financing sorted and then we can get started. They would have to build an insane amount of tools. A lot of tools wouldn't even be up to scratch. It's not just like just some scripts here and there or some pipeline tools. It's also like core functionality with that. So it's a completely different ball game with this. Here's a comment like this: I read an article Ubisoft switched to Blender a while back. I don't think that's true. I don't think they switched to Blender. I think it was a small division of it that started using it more in their art department or something like that. Like the big companies are just not switching around for that. They're allowing people to use it as a tool, but the main heavy pipeline stuff is just not there. Like for instance, if you were to, like one of the problems I have with Blender is a bit like, it's not really the software itself, it's more like the community around it, because a lot of people, they are first Blender artists and 3D artists second, which means that the work they do is constrained by what Blender can do, which is great, because it means that you can the tool really well and you can work with cool stuff. But a lot of people, they are artists first and Blender artists second. Like I'm not a Blender artist, I use Blender. So it means that if I want to make a character that has a lot of hair and fur, I just need better tools than what's available in Blender. And means if I'm doing a full-on production character for that, I will not be able to do that. I could create the sculpt in ZBrush, retopologies in Blender, UVs, all that kind of stuff, but I can get to the same result for UVs and retop in Blender as I could in ZBrush or Maya, whatever. But I could not get to the same result in grooming. It's just nowhere near what you have with XGen or in Houdini grooming tools and such. So it becomes a much bigger discussion for that if like Framestore were to use Blender instead of like Houdini for that, I mean, that's a completely nonsensical discussion. It's so much further ahead when you're looking at tools like Houdini. And so they would have to build entirely new systems. And then if they were to do that, they would still just be ending up exactly where they're currently at. So it's just a completely different discussion than, is it better or not? Yeah, for certain things it's a lot better. If you're doing personal projects and you know what the tools can do, like with grease pencil and such as well, it's fantastic. Concepting is absolutely brilliant. But like where Maya is strong is not like just in the modeling tools, or the like Maya was crappy for modeling for a long time. Then they've just bought a plugin and integrated it. Where Maya is strong is like fundamentally how it works with pipelines. You can plug into anything through the API, and you can create really complicated plugins there. So it's it's a bigger discussion. It's something you have to zoom out. I used to do this with Modo back in the day, because I used Modo, and the industry was still very much Max and Maya, and Modo was very similar to Blender in its position. And I started using Modo a bit in film when I started at NPC. Had my license and everything. I was trying to use it, and I could technically use it, but it was such a pain because I had to constantly re-import and export stuff back and forth. And if it's just polygons, that's fine. The problem is that it's not just polygons. You have like tags associated with the model when you're in a production. You have blend shapes, you have UV sets, you have all sorts of stuff. You have camera lineups and all that. So if you start to use, like in this case, Modo, it was just not really feasible in a production compared to just sticking to Maya. At this point, Maya was worse as well because they hadn't properly integrated the tools. But even when it did integrate them, like even before the integration, it was still just better to use Maya for that, because then the way I saw it was, still see it if you use Blender Remote or something like that, is that you have a whole mystery variable, which is something like how will the cameras translate? Will you use that to translate? You don't really know. There's going to be something new in every single model, and now you're troubleshooting. Let's say you're 20% faster in the software. You still have that variable of an unknown that you don't have in other software. Like if you have to go in and change a model a little bit, that's how it works in production. A lot of the time, the majority of the time, I would say you're not creating something from scratch. You are either picking something up from other people, or you are just going in and modifying your own models and just iterating on that. And if you're working on software, you have to go back and forth all the time. And if you have a Blender file, Moda file, Cinema 4D file saved somewhere, then you're off sick or something, or you quit and somebody else has to pick up your work, they literally can't because they don't have to use the software. So all this is to say that it's a much, much bigger discussion than just, is the software better? If Blender right now were to be just as strong as Maya, well, people still wouldn't switch to it because it doesn't really have a huge benefit to it. The pricing isn't even a huge benefit to it because now you have to retrain your entire staff and it's harder to crew up and such. So it's just, you have to zoom out.
Let's give it a shot. Assuming it's still Dylan is trying just to try to find missing files. I feel like it might not work, but it could be in the same directory. So let's try that. That's external data or something, right? Find missing files. Let's see. Would be nice. Oh my god, thank you so much. Okay, it partly worked. Do we need that selected for everything? That should do all external files though, right? Yeah. That's annoying. Why it has these patches, I'm not really sure. But let's do the leaves. I was just trying to get an overview of the naming convention for this. Unfortunately, this pack is not like set up for Blender. I think it's just Unreal, so it just takes a little bit of time to get everything else set up. Oh yeah, and by the way, like whenever that CG Cookie podcast comes out, you'll hear Henning and I talk about this subject for, I don't know, an hour.
Yeah, it's a very extensive one. It's a very interesting discussion as well in that podcast, because we have people who come from more the Blender side of it. One of them, Kent, he comes from I can't remember his name. He very knowledgeable in the pipeline of things, and he was very just realistic about it in terms of pipeline. Genuinely very interesting discussion. I have no idea how long that's going to be. I think we talked for like 2 hours. I'm guessing maybe they're editing down to about an hour or so. But I have no idea.
It was a long one.
Yeah, it was a long one. It was a really fun one.
Mm.
It's the first podcast we've actually done. I at least haven't done any other podcasts like that.
No, I don't think so. What I'm doing, which you can't see off screen, is I'm organizing files to just make this a little more easy for me. There we go. So we have some birch leaves, and we have one set of birch leaves. Okay, cool. Cool, and then we have an alpha channel for those birch leaves as well.
Here's an interesting comment. I just graduated college. I earned a degree in animation, 3D design. They mainly taught us Maya, and most of my professors said Blender is a joke compared to Maya. I believe Blender is great. Yeah, Blender is not a joke. It's not. It's not at all a joke. It's an incredibly powerful software. What we're talking about, both in the upcoming podcast and also what I mentioned here, has nothing to do with the quality of the software. It has a little bit to do with the quality of software. Some stuff is just objectively worse, and some stuff is better, depending on that. But it's a bigger discussion. It's in no way a joke. Like what Mario is saying here is that there's a case where a lot of schools are only teaching Blender now. New graduates coming out expecting Blender in studios, and that's going to have interesting effects because now you might have first it might be hard to find student or find graduates, and then they're going to be like, well, you're great, you know how to use Blender, let's get you in. And then they might adopt, then these people might be trying to get more Blender adoption in studios, and in all likelihood these people are going to have to learn Maya on the job because the studio does dictate what you're using.
Yeah.
But it also means that a lot of these people, they're going to be starting to use Blender freelance for things because then nobody really cares as long as you're just outputting a model or a shot or something, or and which means they're going to need scripts and such, because once you start using Blender commercially or software commercially, then you really see where it's lacking. And now these areas are going to get stronger. But also, like, if they start new studios as well, like if you start as a freelancer, that's basically the first part to starting a studio, because as a freelancer, you're just a one-person studio. So if you start to join more people together, some of these people are probably going to be starting off as Blender studios. It also means that if you do build it as a Blender first studio, you can do a lot of great stuff. You just have to build some tools around it, and then a lot of new people are going to release these tools available for free as well, or as add-ons. It's just a huge, like, it's like a way to democratize 3D as well in a really real way. Because before, if you were want to, like, if you were in the UK or something, you could probably afford, or in the US, you could afford to buy the software because the wages are much higher. But if you're sitting in like Jakarta or like in India, you were not able to afford the software. There's just no way that you can afford $3,000 a year in all likelihood. So then you had two options: pirate the software, or you would not use 3D. And now, by having Blender available, you could in good conscience actually work with really, really high-end stuff, and there is no cost associated with that. So in that case, it's not really between using Maya or Blender, or using Max or Blender or anything like that. It's just between nothing or Blender. And also, like, computers are much better today. Like, you can do really complicated things in Blender on very low end hardware. Yes, you can't put it into like 200 UDIM territory and all that, but I mean, the computers Morten and I used for 3D in the beginning, they were crappy computers by today's standard. Like, a laptop would be good enough for that, right? So it's just going to have profound changes, and we don't know the changes yet of that. One thing is for sure: the market is going to be growing because a lot more people, the market as a whole is going to be growing because a lot more people are going to just get exposed to 3D.
Man, that is looking... What do you think, Henning? Is this an acceptable birch tree?
I mean, it's not on fire, so that's a problem. Yeah, the birch trees are fine if they are dead or if they're in full bloom, but anything in between, that's when I'm dead for like 2 weeks.
Oh, wait, it's because I've messed up.
Something with Blender as well is this is something that some studios are starting to do with, for instance, with Photoshop. Like, Photoshop is an expensive software, but you have tools like Affinity Photo and such that are like, I have a license for that. It was like $20, something incredibly cheap. It is not as powerful as Photoshop. Photoshop is a better tool, but in most cases. In a lot of cases, if you need to crop something or add text to something or move some stuff around, Affinity is plenty. So what some studios started doing is they're just discouraging the use of Photoshop for most people and encouraging use of Affinity. So particularly if you have like if this is relevant to the Blender discussion, that if a lot of artists could switch over to Blender for like asset creation, I mean, still $3,000 a year, right? And if and if particularly if I'm having like a medium studio that where I have maybe like 20 3D artists and like half of those could be using a software which is completely free, then
Yeah.
I mean it's a big win for me, right? Like that's $30,000 a year just saved. That's a lot of money. Granted that they are equal. Do you have any general good advice for the VFX industry? Well, it depends entirely on what part of the VFX industry you want to get into or what you want advice on. It's a big industry spanning the whole globe. You know, Australia is becoming a big hub for VFX now. London is obviously massive. You have New York, Los Angeles, Vancouver, Montreal, Singapore. Like it just depends on where it is, and of course it depends on your position as well, like a junior, senior, lead, or and specifically what you want to do as well. Happy to answer questions, but we need some more specificity. Yeah, here's a good one, but you might still need to learn other programs to have the opportunity to be in that position with industry first, right? And this is referring to as opposed to using Blender first. My advice for people is like I'm doing a mentorship outside FlippedNormals and I have some students who are working with Blender and I'm like, just use Blender, build your portfolio pieces in Blender, and then once you're done with your portfolio, it might take months before you can get a job. Learn Maya as fast as humanly possible. Just like it's just going to help you. Essentially, you are at such a disadvantage when you are applying for jobs because you have pretty ruthless competition out there. So you do everything you can to remove the barrier of entry, remove anything that makes the studio go, yeah, you know, we want to pick the other guy instead. And if you have two people who are identical in every single way, it's not possible, of course, but in this hypothetical scenario, then two people are completely identical, but one is using the software the studio is using, the other one is not. I mean, we're going to pick the person who knows how to use the software, just can hit the ground running. So yes, it's definitely a big advantage to knowing the software. It's not even about which software is good. If you have a studio that's using only Blender and you come in there using Houdini and Maya, they're going to be like, get out of here, and force you to learn Blender, right? It's just about being compatible with the studio. Like when Morten and I joined VFX about a decade ago, time flies, then
Oh yeah.
we could plug into basically any studio right away. Like there wasn't really a problem that we had to learn a pipeline, of course. But if we started at a new job, then you basically just had to learn the conventions of the company, and then we could start modeling or texturing or anything like that day one.
Okay, it looks like our tree is having a bit of a identity crisis here.
Hmm.
So we'll see if there's any. Let's see, scale, rotation, 90 degrees. That would be why. So let's rotate it. Actually, fly rotation. There we go. Oh, nice. Now we have a forest.
Perfect. I mean, you at least created something unique, right?
Very unique. There we go.
This is a very specific question, but you know if there's a way in Blender play build-up brush to change the alpha to none or soft like you can in ZBrush? I can't find a way. Yeah, I've been trying. I don't really know how to do that. I want to do the same thing as well. I can't really find a good way to emulate the clay build-up brush from ZBrush.
It's just one of those tools that it's just great in ZBrush.
Yeah, you can sculpt anything with. You can create basically anything with clay build-up. Here's a question. Do you think anyone can reach senior level as a 3D artist? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's basically just do it for long enough, then you'll get there. A senior level, it's so hard to define specifically what does that mean. It depends from studio to studio, but essentially, kind of the gist of that is that you can do anything they throw at you. You can't do it just out of the box. You might have to look up tutorials, such, but it means that you can generally estimate how long something is going to take, and you can generally work without too much supervision. The way I see it, like senior and lead are also just entirely different things. they, it's a lead is just a managerial position. That of course depends on studio to studio, while a senior is an artist. So it really just depends on the studio for that as well. But lead is usually paid better. But in terms of like position hierarchy, I never saw lead as being above senior. It was just a parallel position. Yeah, like street level music is saying. I guess senior is just a job title for someone really experienced. And yeah. I mean the way you get really experienced is just to do it a lot. It's also a tricky thing as well when it comes to the senior title, because what does that even mean? It could be you can do high level tasks. It could be that. It could be you have a lot of years of experience. It could be a salary thing. So it could be all three of them. It could be that you have a high salary, you can do really complicated things, and you have a lot of experience. But you can also have people who have a few years experience who can do really incredible work, but they don't really have the salary yet. Are they a senior? Well, officially no, but they might be kicking a senior's butt super hard. So I've seen this a lot, right? You have people who are just like the seniors are afraid of them, but the person's still making a third of their salary. So
But they should be afraid, you know. It's a good incentive for them to up their skills and like keep up to date, I think.
Yeah, and on that note, you also have people who have been working for like 15, 20 years or a senior in that sense, but they're also like dinosaurs. You have this in every single studio. People have been doing this for a very long time, but they're not up to date on tools, and they're using just very old techniques for things, poly modeling things, or just doing instead of like sculpting things and just doing stuff in a very old school way. So yeah, it really just the senior one is such an elusive title.
Yeah. So one thing, I'll talk a little bit now after spending, I don't know, 30 minutes going through folder structures that you really couldn't see off screen. Trust me, it was boring. It really wasn't worth looking at. Anyway, something that I wanted to do to the geometry nodes here was introducing the minimum scale as well. Because you see we have the max scale. I've renamed it from random scale to max scale. So the max scale just defines what is the maximum we can scale an object up to in X, Y, and Z. And that's now with our multiplier here, it's set to 0.047, just random. But the problem is it scales down our minimums to a very, very tiny, tiny amount. So right now we have a full-grown birch tree that's the size of a person. So in order to combat that a little bit, I duplicated our multiply node and then fed that back into the geometry input. Created this min scale value, and then now this min scale we can increase to say, hey, never let our minimum scale go below this, for example, or whatever the tiniest tree we had before. So right now this could be a plausible size for a birch tree, even though it's still the same tree. The other ones can still look, big as well. So maybe something like that. That way we create a more believable forest. Obviously just with one tree for now, but now we can start to slowly populate. And the cool thing about this is because everything is done with nodes, we can go in and modify our landscape a little bit. Let's see here. We'll do something proper in a bit, but you can, start creating hills and valleys, and your landscape and all the geometry on it will follow, which is pretty cool, I think. and remember to save. It's good. It's good to have Henning on the screen because then I see him and I'm like, okay, yeah, right. I gotta save.
I'm the battery and saving a reminder.
So let's see. What else do we have that we can play around with tree-wise? We have some. I mean, there are other birch trees as well, and some pine trees. We could sort of create, you could create groups of things, like have a birch group and a pine group as well. So, let's see, grass as well, which is really cool. Let's do one of each to start with, and then we can always, the nice thing about this system is, now that we have this system, we can just plug in more things into our collection. So imagine that this cube here that I've just created, you can't see, I can move it to our trees, and then it'll start incorporating this little cube as well. But it's so tiny, I don't think you can see it. Right there. It scattered a cube right there. So we can do that with other trees as well, which is really handy, I think. But let's kill that for now. And then the complexity really starts to go up once you add other types of, let's call them other types of geometry to our system. Because right now, this geometry node over here, it just pulls from this system, right? But then once you have other systems, you could say, I want them, like I talked about before with the master seed value, you could do that with the density as well. Have them share the density, but also subdivide the density. So you have a master density, or you have an isolated tree density or rock density button. So let's see. So just for context, this is what I'm looking at the moment. We just have a bunch of meshes and trying to figure out what should we go for. And like, I think we can make this scene pretty complex over the course of a few streaming sessions. But you know, it'll take a little bit of time. We're not in a rush. We're just here to hopefully entertain you and teach you a little bit and answer some questions at the same time.
Yeah, it's really fun to do the streams again. We haven't done them since the Black Friday sale. It was I wanted to do more of it, but the development of the website has been such a tricky one. That's also one of the reasons we haven't been doing as many videos as we want to do. Yeah. We really want to like properly revitalize the YouTube, but there's always some stuff that keeps popping up when it comes to the site.
Yeah, running a massive website like that is not free. You know, it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, but luckily we have a team of like 50 people, right? Working on FlippedNormals in the background, and
yeah,
it's all. We're definitely not like a very, very, very tiny team doing like 16 jobs at the same time. That would have really sucked, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh no. So let's see. What do we have here, rock-wise? There we go. Same as before. We have a rock, and we have a low-res version of that rock, which we don't need. So let's delete that. Thank you, Mario. Hopefully it'll continue to get better. And I mean, right now with the sale going on, there's a lot of people visiting the website. So there are definitely some slowdowns, and it's something that we are like constantly working to improve.
Yeah, performance is always such a tricky one, particularly when you have a complicated system.
Yeah.
Yeah, when with the FlippedNormals YouTube channel, you're really just seeing the tip of the iceberg of FlippedNormals. The bottom of the iceberg is would be a lot of servers somewhere dealing with a lot of stuff. Yeah, we would love to dedicate a lot more time for the YouTube channel and tutorials. Like I have a course coming out pretty soon, which we talked about the stream yesterday, which I'm very excited about. If anyone is following me on Twitter, you've seen that I've been posting a lot of anatomy, and in the last stream as well. You can find that that in on the channel as well, because I did like a 2-hour stream yesterday. It's just introduction to anatomy. So there's a very, very cool anatomy course coming up very soon, basically focusing on everything you need to know about anatomy. Yes, there's more stuff that we're not covering, but it's kind of everything you need to know.
I'm very excited for this course to come
Yeah,
out. It's been
same.
underway for a while, and you've been working really hard at it.
It took like 6 months to a year of practice as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard when it comes like sculpting anatomy, working with anatomy from a practical point of view. It's like it's difficult, fine, difficult, but teaching anatomy, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I guess it's the same thing like fiddling around with nodes, right? Figuring stuff out yourself and doing it is one thing, but actually teaching it and showing in a stream, I mean, you're a brave man.
I mean, there's a reason all this is so slow. It's because I'm making things up on the spot as I'm trying to go through this, which is also like I could have sat down for 2 weeks trying to prep this and make it super streamlined, but you know, this way we get to chat and people get to follow along. They get frustrated the same way I get frustrated because they're like, "Oh my god, just get on with it." So you know, we all learn from this, which is nice. You can be frustrated alongside me. So.
That's one of the key differences between a stream and a tutorial or YouTube tutorial, that whenever you're doing, if you were to do this for a tutorial, it would be a lot of explaining just the core concepts of it. But in terms of like connecting things up, that would all be pre-made. Like you have a scene on the one monitor and you're redoing it.
Yeah.
And of course you're not just like be like literally just plugging in and creating nodes. You of course have to explain it. But if you're like, yeah, we need to set the random value to 0.25, yeah, that's just, it's already predefined, pre-made, because if you're going to try to figure that stuff out in real time, that stuff is just impossible and you're wasting everyone's time. It's different for sculpting because then it's a lot of back and forth, but this is basically code, right? You could take this and if you have a node, if you have a node system like Nuke, for instance, you can literally take the whole script, paste it. Like it's called a script. The whole flow is called a script in Nuke because it's just a script, and you could paste it in somewhere else because it's just code. So when you're dealing with code, math, there isn't really a lot of room for creativity. Either it looks fine or it doesn't look fine. And if you have a lot of values back and forth and they're not exactly the same, man, that stuff is hard.
Something tells me that the UVs here are a little bit off.
Could it be a different texture map?
Could be, but look at the size of these.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are tiny compared to the UV maps.
Maybe the whole thing needs to just scale up.
Interesting. Interesting. It's definitely a rock. It's rock 1. Unless it's another rock. Let's see.
Usually when I'm dealing with this in tutorials, I go like, all right, cut away this, fixing the issue. And then I'm like, all right, cool, start again. And then I cut away 20 minutes of fiddling around.
That's the part that you usually don't see in tutorials, right? It's all that stuff.
It's always tricky if you should include that or not in a tutorial. Should you include mistakes? I always opt for, I include stuff that's useful to include, like where people can learn from it. But if it's just fiddling around, then you're like, oh yeah, I used the wrong texture map. That's not really useful. That's just annoying to look at.
Like if you make a mistake because you don't pay attention or you didn't think about it, then I don't think you should include it. But if it's like a very common thing, something that's really easy to mess up, then you know I think it could be beneficial to leave it in.
If every single tutorial I'm doing, I've always made the end result beforehand, even if it's a simple thing, and every single chapter is properly prepped where the scene files are done beforehand. Because if you don't do that, you're just gonna have to do it twice. You're just gonna mess it up while recording, and you might as well just assume you're gonna mess up and prep this afterwards, because it's so hard. It's also what we're doing for YouTube as well with a lot of the videos, that we already have prepped scene files. Because if you're, I keep seeing this, was one specific one on lighting. It was a 5-minute, or it's a 25-minute lighting video, something like that, and it was a 25-minute video, but it was only 5 minutes of lighting. The remaining was, it would be like if this stream here, if this was about lighting, and we would spend like 2 hours just blocking in the environment. Just block in the environment and then start recording when you get to the lighting part.
Exactly. Okay, I think I figured out what's going on. Maybe. I think you were right. It might have been a different texture because it's a tiny rock.
Hmm. Yeah, that was my suspicion.
Let's have a look. Nope, that's even worse. The sale ends on the 3rd, 4th. Do you remember, Henning?
What's that, sorry?
The sale ends on the 3rd or the 4th, I think. Right? Oh, wait. Oh, that's
No, it's
completely
like
off.
it's like the 10th.
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah, the 10th. Yeah.
What am I mixing it up with? I have,
I have
no idea.
I have no idea.
Nothing happens on. I have a physio on the 5th.
Yeah,
That
I don't think
doesn't-
that's it.
No, I don't think that's not it. Anyway, that clearly doesn't work. Man. Luckily, the stream is over soon, and then behind the scenes, what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go through all of this folder-wise and have it all sorted for tomorrow, so we can just drag and drop assets in and out of this, because this is frustrating for me and everyone else watching, I think.
I was I was posting a lot of updates on the Intro to Anatomy course on Twitter, and somebody was asking me like, how much editing do you do? And I guess the answer is basically this stream here will be the unedited version of it, and the edited version will be about half or something, where you're just cutting away whole sections. I usually have like notes being like, yeah, cut away the last 20 minutes, starting from here. This is what needs to go, and then you just cut away everything. So that's why there aren't really a lot of mistakes in the videos. But my God, it's rough. But that's also what we knew when we started this stream. Like, this was just about exploring things, learning a little bit together, doing a Q&A, keeping this a bit more casual. Do you guys have a favorite course, one you enjoyed making? Do you have a favorite course there, Morten, you enjoyed making?
Favorite course? I think the Souls character, the Souls boss character I did not too long ago, which is probably a year old now.
Yeah, it is.
Damn it. That's probably my favorite. I really enjoyed that.
Those are really cool. I'm going to find a link for people now to that one.
What about you, Henning?
Yeah, I had one that, I mean, with the caveat that I don't really enjoy making any of the courses because it's such a pain in the ass. It's really, really hard. I'm enjoying kind of the struggle, but making courses is just really, really hard.
It is.
Finding Morton's Soul course here. I think that came out like May last year or something.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me, right?
Yeah, it's getting there. It's pretty nuts how fast time flies. One of my favorites was, I'm actually going to post this in the chat right now. This is the Character Porter masterclass. This I had a lot of fun with this one. At first, it started as a personal project during COVID lockdowns when I was in Norway. We couldn't leave the country, and then I remade it using Blender. Remade the whole thing using Blender and Substance Painter, because I made it originally in Mari and Maya. And then once the whole thing was remade, then I remade it again for the course. So that was a 20-hour course. So that took a long time to make. Here is Morton's course, which is both of these courses are 40% off now as well. So these are pretty good in terms of like how they complement each other. Morton's is much more of a ZBrush workflow, but more of the concepting part of it. And the course I have, this is a full production character. Like this, you can use as a template for like if you want to build portfolio pieces and such. Like every single step could be built for that. Like we go through the retopology, the UV mapping, the texturing, all that. If for a portfolio piece, you'll probably take each step to a higher level. But that's also the case, right? Like it took me 24 hours to make with 20 hours of footage. I cannot make a portfolio piece in 20 hours from scratch.
No.
Like that's insane. That's like 3 days worth of work, right? Like no way.
So right now, I'm just making basically a duplicate of my geometry nodes up here, and I'll probably go in and group them to make the setup a little bit more, clear, so it's not as confusing. But for now, we just need to get the rocks working as well. See if we can't get that up and running before I have to leave.
I mean, it's coming together. It's pretty cool to see how you can whip something up like this pretty fast. And
I mean, obviously, so a lot of the things are, there's a lot of figuring stuff out at the moment. Like we talked about, if I were to do this for a course, I would go through all of this, figure out everything, write down notes, make sure that all the settings were written down so I knew exactly where to find everything, right? And then record a more clear version, something that takes maybe 2 hours to discover how to do and do for the first time, you could maybe do in 20 minutes, 15 minutes, once you know exactly where to look and how to connect things.
So, FlippedNormals, Blender nodes course when, Martin?
Oh, yes. I mean, that could totally happen.
That'd be a cool one.
Yeah. And so right now here, for example, we know we're running into that issue where the trees and the rocks will be using the same both density and scale. And so from here on, we would start to split things out in max scale trees, min scale trees, max scale rocks, etc., random rotation rocks and trees, in order to keep it more, user friendly and to make a more procedural system that we can just control from here instead of going into individual nodes and changing some values. That's one of the things that I enjoy the most about working with nodes, is creating these systems. It's like you're creating a small little program, essentially.
It's so satisfying when you get that stuff to work. I love that.
Right, just have a couple more minutes before I need to leave, so I just want to take a look at the rocks here first. So what we'll do is I'll just disconnect, leave the trees there for now. I'll disconnect the rocks. And don't care about the rotation, but what we do want to look at is probably the scale. Then we'll have a look at why our rock isn't showing up on our plane. And that is because I haven't actually set our geometry node to be on the plane. So now we have a giant rock that's enveloping our entire world here.
It's often like that where there is like one button or something.
Yeah, exactly.
For something.
Let's do the same thing. There you go. Now we have rocks. And so one thing that we can't do now, obviously we don't have it connected here, but to create a temporary input like we have up here, you can take a value node and then you pipe that value into here. So this temporarily is going to be what controls our scale. But we can place that somewhere else in our node group input up here a little bit later, for example. But so now we can see that it creates rocks everywhere we have trees, which is not what we want. This is what I talked about earlier, about them sharing a seed value. And for example, we can do 1 for a seed value here, and then it'll place everything on points, but at different points compared to our trees. And I think that's about all I have time for today. I need to go pick up my daughter from daycare. But yeah, this will continue tomorrow, and I'll play around with this a little bit off stream in the evening as well to organize things, make it a little bit nicer so the experience is better for all of us. One thing, Slender Black is asking if the website is down for him or just me. We are doing some changes to the website, so it might actually be down right now. I haven't checked with our dev team, but let's see.
It was up for me at least.
Okay.
It happens. It's It's probably could be a lot of traffic. It's up here. It's a little bit slow at the moment, but
Yeah.
hopefully that's
We do see that with sales sometimes because of the traffic, especially these larger sales when there's such a large influx of people going to the website.
Yeah. I'm also going to be streaming more this week. I'm not going to be streaming tonight, but probably tomorrow, I reckon. I'm going to be doing some more anatomy streaming, talking about the muscles that time. Talking about how to
nice.
simplify muscles and such, because that is really important.
Depending on the times, I might be able to join in some of the evenings, but
that'd be fantastic.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But okay. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Nice to do a stream again, and I look forward to jumping on another one tomorrow, I think it's going to be. So, yeah.
See you guys soon.
See everyone. Bye.